Jose Mourinho, Xavi, Maurizio Pochettino. What did these managers all have in common? They've all been sacked and they've all lost the dressing room at some point in their careers. Now, what does that even mean? To lose the dressing room, to lose the locker room, and then to get sacked. Most people, most fans, most people that don't understand what the ins and outs of professional football is really like, they don't fully understand this term. It's a lot uglier and it's a lot longer of a process than the media makes it out to be. As a professional footballer myself, I've seen similar situations happen within clubs that I've played for. Today, I'm going to show you what it really looks like when a manager loses the locker room. For the sake of my career, this is a completely fictitious account of a story that would be accurate if something like this were to happen. If you want to learn what really happens, stick around, subscribe, and let's get on to it. Losing the locker room does not come in just one fell swoop. It usually comes in small steps. Here are the telltale signs. Step 1, discipline goes right out the window. Players, they stop showing up on time. They come in whenever they want, and they ignore the fining system. Show up late, they won't show up an hour early like they're supposed to, and sometimes they won't even show up at all. Especially when it comes to gym sessions, they will skip. Now this can be for a number of reasons, but for the most part, it just comes down to the fact that these players have lost motivation or just don't seem to put in that extra care. Step 2, the problems start coming in from within. Fights start to break out. Petty little fights. Cliques start to form. What else happens? Players start bickering amongst each other after games or during games, and it can get really ugly really fast. You have to remember that we're professional footballers. Our livelihoods depend on the sport, so when things get ugly, they can get ugly very quickly. And when people are talking bad about each other behind their backs, when cliques are starting to form, that's a bad sign. Number 3, lineup changes. Extreme lineup changes. For the sake of argument, let's say a club were to let go of 6 of their players randomly in the middle of the season. Well, you can be rest assured that the club is looking for some scapegoats. These scapegoats are what essentially the club is going to blame for the results or for what's going on, and they're going to try to bring in new guys to try and freshen up the team. Sometimes these players don't deserve the fate that was handed to them, but that's just the reality, because ultimately everyone needs someone to blame. Now this last one is the most important, but it's also the most subtle. The players just stop giving everything in training. Instead of going for that 50-50 tackle, instead of going for that long shot, instead of taking that risk that they normally would have taken, or instead of going that extra run, making that extra run, or making that extra push for the final third, players aren't doing that anymore. They're just going through the motions and they just don't seem to care. They don't seem to care about the results, and so they stop giving their all in training. Now this is the most important because those little details, that 1% in the professional game makes a huge difference. And that's the issue. That's where the issue lies. And that's how you know you've lost the locker room as a manager. So what happens when you watch these Premier League or La Liga or Bundesliga clubs, and what happens to them is first there will be a bad spell of results. And from that bad spell of results, the players will stop trying as much, and that's when managers lose the locker room. Because 1, they're not making enough of an effort as players, and 2, they just probably don't believe in that manager anymore, or that manager has done something that does not please them. Now that player-manager relationship is so delicate, but it's so important. And this is why man management is extremely important to a professional football manager. If you can manage your players, if you can keep them happy or as happy as possible, if you can keep them as on board as possible, then you'll have a much better stretch of results over the course of the season. Most of the time when it comes to these managers, unfortunately, they either manage wrong, or they're too extreme, or they just don't do anything. So hypothetically speaking, if a manager talks to only some players and doesn't talk to other players, just completely ignores them, for example, or the club does things for certain players and not for other players, that's going to create disparity, and that's going to create division, and that's going to create loss of the locker room, and that's going to create a bad situation and a lot of tension during the season. Now, I've seen these things firsthand at some places. I'm obviously not going to mention where, I'm not going to mention clubs or names, but this is a very real situation. These are things that happen, and they are very intense. And sometimes it can be drawn out over the course of the season, and then sometimes it'll just blow up within just a few days. So if you see the Jadon Sancho situation, for example, with Ten Hag, or if you see the Zlatan Ibrahimovic situation with Pep Guardiola, or if you see many other situations that happen with Jose Mourinho, these are all prime examples of what happens when you lose the locker room and when you're just not managing the way that maybe you should be, or you've just lost touch with the locker room, unfortunately. Think of Erik Ten Hag at United for a long time there. Think of Jose Mourinho at the end of his time at Roma, for example, or you can think of Xavi with FC Barcelona. Now, I hope you guys never have to go through those situations, because they're honestly very, 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 very uncomfortable. But it's also part of the journey. It's part of being a professional footballer. You're going to go through it one way or another. There's going to be a manager sacking. There's going to be uncomfortable tension in the locker room. There's going to be some sort of issues that you're going to deal with in your career, and you have to learn how to deal with it by just being disciplined and focusing on yourself moving forward. So there you have it. I appreciate you guys. Please subscribe if you have not already. Make sure to like and comment down below what you'd like to see next, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.